Okay, so cleanup step number one. Let's see if we can get rid of this weird flickering that we sometimes get if our ball gets kind of close to our final peg, but then quickly falls out of that radius. I think the theory behind getting this to work is pretty straightforward. What we'll do is we can record at what point in time we start to zoom in, and then if we're told to zoom out, we'll check and see has enough time passed that it won't look weird. And if enough time has passed, we'll say, okay, now let's zoom out. Again, like with the Time Master class, this is probably functionality I could include in here, but might be a little cleaner if I push off into another class. So I'm going to create another class, and I suppose to be consistent with our camera and actor metaphor, we're going to call this, I'm going to call it a director. And when I create this director, we'll pass in the camera and the Time Master that we want to be using. And so I'm going to create a couple member variables here. And initialize these when we create our director. And I'm also going to create two more member variables. The first is going to be a Boolean that's just going to check if we are zoomed in. And then the second will be a, let's call it minimum time to zoom out. When we initialize this, zoomed in will be false, and we'll just set this to 0 for now. So first things first, let's just copy the exact same logic that we have in our main Puggle class. I'm going to create a public function called zoom in that will include a point to zoom into. And we'll just have camera zoom to that point, and we will have our Time Master slow down. And I'm also going to create another public function, and we'll call it back to normal. That will have our camera zoom out, and we'll have our Time Master go back to normal. So far, so good? All right. Next, we'll go back to our main Puggle class. And in addition to creating our camera and our Time Master, I will now create a director. And right underneath where we've created our Time Master and our camera, I will say director equals new director, and we'll be passing in our camera and our Time Master. And then finally, going down to our check for zoom function, I can replace most of this code with director zoom in. I can replace this code with director back to normal. And I can do the same thing here. All right, well, we've already made this look a little simpler, and that's kind of nice. And if we were to run this, I think hopefully we'll see that everything works the way it did before. So that's good. We're pretty happy. But obviously nothing has actually changed yet. So let's go in and add some logic to our director to make it a little smarter. First thing we can do is when we call zoom in, I will set our zoomed in variable to true. And when I call back to normal, I will set our zoomed in variable equal to false. And I can do a little check here that says, all right, if we're not zoomed in, then we can zoom in our camera, slow down our time, and otherwise we'll do nothing. Similarly, in my back to normal function, I can say, you know, we're only going to do this zoom out stuff and call back to normal if we are zoomed in. And I think this is a little better than before. You know, if we go back to our Puggle class, Okay, so we are still kind of calling zoom in every frame or back to normal every frame if there happens to be 1 or 0 goal pegs left on our screen. However, at least we're saving ourselves a little time. Although we are still running this function every frame, most of the time it's going to execute just a simple little if statement and do nothing. So, so I'm going to say we've kind of accomplished this item on our to-do list. Now to stop the weird flickering, let's go back to our director. And what I'm going to do is, in my zoomed in function, after we've zoomed in, I'm going to record our minimum time to zoom out equal to flash utils get timer plus, I don't know, let's say 1,000 milliseconds. And then down here in my back to normal function, I'm going to say, all right, if get timer is greater or equal to our minimum time to zoom out, then we will actually zoom out. Otherwise, we'll wait for back to normal to get called again, which will probably be next frame, and then we can actually see if it's safe to zoom out. Okay, so to demonstrate this is working, I've jumped ahead in time a little bit, and I'm going to shoot a ball that passes just inside the range of this final goal peg, just inside enough that it will trigger a camera zoom in, but far enough away that it would normally produce a flicker under our old logic. Now this time as we do it, we can see that even though our ball passes pretty quickly through our little 75 pixel range, our camera stays zoomed in for at least a second. And I think this will look a whole lot better. You know, clearly it doesn't get the weird flickering behavior like before. So I'm going to call this a success. And I'm going to jump back to my to-do list here, and I'm going to say, you know what, we've also stopped the weird flickering. All right, so there you go. I've got one other little thing I probably want to clean up before we move on, and then we can move on to the aim line.